everybody, welcome to the Damage Report. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's very nice of you to tune in, especially because there's not really any big news. It's just sort of one of those, dotting the I's, just do it. No, it's big news day. Hey Brett, you're here for big news day.
John, I felt like earlier you were being sarcastic in your appraisal of the news. No, there's a lot of news.
There's a ton.
You know how I know there was a lot of news today? Is as you were at your computer producing the show, just every 3 or 4 minutes to yourself, you would go, there's too much news.
Yeah, I do say that a lot. I also was getting very frustrated as we got closer because a lot of people were talking right near my desk as I was preparing for multiple interviews, and I was like, do I want to be that guy and say something? And I wasn't, except now that I did, in a far more public venue.
Way more public, way more passive.
Way more public. Can you please not?
Really quick shout out at the beginning of the show. Happy half hour this week. We have Rick Strom.
But watch it anyway.
Yeah. We had bourbon. There will be
boom. Take that, you dumb jock.
And there's another person I'm passively aggressively attacking on an open forum. But Ricky Strom, we cover a lot of cool, funny Trump stuff and drink a lot of bourbon, and that's why I might be a few steps behind today.
Yeah.
I just took some ibuprofen, which is bad for my liver, but it's good for my head, and I'll take any help I can get right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I knew that you probably had a fun happy half hour when I saw that you were just sticking around for the main show, and I was like, oh, I guess he really wants to do the main show. Nope, he was sobering up. So that's what happens. Anyway, obviously big news day. We're gonna talk about the blah blah, the Buzzfeeds and the newses and the reports and everything, but we've also got a couple of great guests. We've got an update on New York City's proposed expansion of healthcare. We've got the longest serving member of the New York State Assembly is gonna be joining us to break down this addition to their healthcare, their public option that they currently have, and where they can go from here to potentially achieve full single payer. Later on the show, totally a coincidence, I just wanted to have more authors on. So Andrew Coan, who's been on the show before, he's gonna join us to talk about his book on the sort of the history of special prosecutors and special counsels. Turns out it's pretty relevant, so we'll be talking about the Buzzfeed stuff with him as well, and the bar hearings from earlier this week. Lots of other stuff, AOC speech on the floor, blah, blah, blah. Let's jump into the news, because there's so much to get to. Last night, Buzzfeed News reported that they had been briefed by multiple law enforcement officers about the fact that Donald Trump had apparently told Michael Cohen to lie to Congress about the Moscow Trump Tower project. That is interesting for a number of reasons. High up on that list is that it is a felony to tell someone to lie to Congress under oath. A felony. So let's just be clear about that as we go forward, what the implications of this are. So President Donald Trump directed his longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress about negotiations to build that tower in Moscow. The president personally instructed him to lie by claiming that negotiations ended months earlier than they actually did in order to obscure Trump's involvement. Trump also supported a plan set up by Michael Cohen, reminder that was at the time his personal lawyer, to visit Russia during the presidential campaign in order to personally meet President Vladimir Putin and jumpstart the tower negotiations. Quote, make it happen, the sources say that Trump told Cohen. The two law enforcement sources say he had at least 10 face-to-face meetings with Cohen about the deal during the campaign. And sort of adding on to this, the special counsel's office learned about Trump's directive for Cohen to lie to Congress through interviews with multiple witnesses from the Trump organization and internal company emails, text messages, and a cache of other documents. Cohen then acknowledged those instructions during his interviews with that office. All of that is a point that we're gonna return to shortly, but what do you think?
So here is what's going to happen, is the president is going to deny as much as he can, and he has already taken steps on Twitter to kind of point out those who are attempting to appeal to the president by trying to discredit Michael Cohen. So that is him closing the loop. But the only kind of legal defense I've seen from the Trump White House when actually deciding to face these kinds of developments is, well, I mean, he just asked him to do stuff. The president isn't the lawyer. The lawyer's the lawyer. If the lawyer goes ahead and lies, isn't that the lawyer's fault? Because the lawyer should know the law. But in America, we have decided that if you actively try to get someone to lie, that to specifically Congress, then that is a big deal.
Yeah.
You can't just do that. And they want to point out, oh, he's kind of like a businessman. He's from New York. He's like, come on, cover my tracks. Even if that were to come out that explicitly,
what does that argument mean?
But what they're saying is like,
let's rob a bank. If you say it in that tone, it doesn't become legal.
But that's exactly the tactic that they want. So if you and you'll find them absolutely saying it because they've done it in the past when they were talking about Cohen. It's like Cohen was my lawyer and Cohen did all that stuff. How am I to know the law about other things having to do with payments to people to cover up whatever potential sex stories might surface?
The separate felony that could potentially take down the president.
And that's a separate felony, but they're going to probably use the same, because that's Trump's appeal and tactic the whole time, is to just be some guy.
Yeah, and it's all nonsense. Yeah. I mean, Michael Cohen lying to Congress is a crime for Michael Cohen. It is a crime that he is already suffering the consequences of. Telling him to lie is a separate crime, and it's a crime that it's not like all of this just exists floating through outer space and we're trying to get a grasp on it. This is startlingly close to what happened under Nixon. I mean, this is one of the things that formed the basis for talks of impeachment against the president. Yeah. That he was counseling his legal representation to lie, to purposefully derail the investigation.
And there was one article a little while ago that I saw that was Trump's slow motion Saturday Night Massacre. Because the lesson from Nixon, who in addition to doing what you said, just went in and fired a bunch of people who were in charge of the investigation and inquiry into his misdeeds. But the analysis of this, and I forgot who wrote it, and I'm terrified that it might be Chris Cillizza, but it might also not be.
But if it is, you're done. If you quote him, you're done.
Sit in a dark room and cry that I like something from Chris Cillizza, but I don't think it was from him. But the idea that in this situation, Trump has learned not to not fire people and get rid of people who are involved in investigations, but slowly to dismiss them over time, as though the Lady Justice's visual acuity is based on movement.
Yeah, she's much like a T-Rex in that respect. So before we get to Trump and some of his representatives responding, at least in a roundabout way, to these charges, I want to talk a little bit about obviously with any story, you can't simply accept what is in the report as necessarily true. That is technically something that you could say when you report on anything. It is only necessary to say with these stories, because I have noticed that although I talk about many different topics on this show, only when talking about stuff having to do with this investigation do I get people saying, "Where's the evidence?"
Right.
Like if I talk about like coal ash leaking from a plant, nobody's like, "Prove it. Have you seen the primary evidence yourself?" Nobody does that.
Right.
They don't do that. Yesterday I talked about how the US Air Force has been training UAE pilots before they go into Yemen. And nobody was like, "Did you personally file the Freedom of Information Act request?" But in this, suddenly people are very interested in evidence.
People on our side?
No, anybody. I don't know.
Everyone.
I was Sean Hannity. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Tucker Carlson. Fine. So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, so we already read the graphic. This is not just Cohen said this. Cohen didn't only say this, and Cohen didn't first say this. These law enforcement officers are saying that multiple people from the Trump organization were interviewed. There was documented evidence, text messages, emails, and things like that support this argument. It was then confirmed by Cohen. So let's just be very clear about that. Jason Leopold, one of the reporters for this, for Buzzfeed said, "We have seen documents." So they are not just getting a secondhand accounting of this, which is important to note. And then we also have this next video. Anthony Cormier, Buzzfeed news investigator, asked about how certain they are that this reporting will be borne out once we know more.
I am rock solid. My sourcing on this goes beyond the two that are on the record. This 100% happened. I am the individual who confirmed and verified that it happened. I am telling you that our sourcing goes beyond the two that I was able to put on the record. We were able to gather information from individuals who know that this happened. This is a thing that it happened.
Which is not to say that in the end it will turn out that those law enforcement officers, as well as other witnesses, were lying about this or mistaken. That is entirely possible. But I think that I've now given multiple levels of caveats. We can return to talking about a story of incredible import for our country and the future of the presidency. In terms of how people have responded to this, obviously it was big news on Twitter last night, including amongst politicos that have something to do with this in the future. The Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff said the allegation that the President of the United States may have suborned perjury before our committee in an effort to curtail the investigation and cover up his business dealings with Russia is among the most serious to date. Man, that tells you a lot about our country. Among the most serious to date. We will do what's necessary to find out if it's true. Bernie Sanders tweeted, if this report is true, Donald Trump committed obstruction of justice, a felony and a potentially impeachable offense. I am glad that the House will be investigating this serious issue, which they will. Now, moving on to the representation. Lanny Davis said, I believe he said something to the effect of that this is ridiculous, but did not say the president didn't tell Michael Cohen to lie. Donald Trump tweeted, Kevin Corke on Fox News, because remember, he wakes up and he watches Fox News for 4 hours and tweets what he sees. Don't forget, Michael Cohen has already been convicted of perjury and fraud, and as recently as this week, the Wall Street Journal has suggested that he may have stolen tens of thousands of dollars, lying to reduce his jail time. Watch father-in-law. Because if we now have new evidence that you've committed obstruction of justice, why not respond by committing obstruction of justice with witness tampering? He's
so ridiculous.
He's saying, if you don't stop cooperating, I'm going after your father.
Is that, yeah.
And that's the third most important wrinkle of this today.
Maybe Father-in-Law is like a new show that he watches on the Me channel.
Don't cancel it. Well, one more comment. So Rudy Giuliani, according to Philip Rucker, Rudy Giuliani responded to the Buzzfeed story saying, if you believe Cohen, I can get you a great deal on the Brooklyn Bridge, which is two things. One, again, Cohen is not the primary source for this information. Two, that's not a denial that it happened.
Right. And three, exactly what got Chris Christie in the first place. This is the new Bridgegate.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, specifically, like, it's funny to kind of put forward this thing about Michael Cohen being convicted of perjury, because the way that he was convicted of perjury was through corroborating evidence. So in this situation, you will have, the reason that the BuzzFeed reporter felt confident in publishing these stories about how Cohen was told to lie was because he had corroborating evidence. And if it goes to, if that is all based on stuff that Mueller has and other people in the special prosecutor's office have, then at that point, that is what he's going to go on in order to get these convictions, and will precipitate any kind of high crime and misdefelony that the president has perpetrated.
Yeah, and look, let's put this in a little bit more context. We already knew that Michael Cohen had lied about this to Congress. If not at the direction of the president, what is the other explanation? Because he's a swell guy who's always looking out for his buddies? It kind of always had to be this. Now that is not proof of anything, but it does fit in with that. Also, at the time, an interview, very interesting one, we've played it multiple times, with Paul Manafort. Now that we know a little bit about what was going on with these financial dealings, this quote makes a little bit more sense. Take a look at this.
So to be clear, Mr. Trump has no financial relationships with any Russian oligarchs.
That's what he said. That's what I said. That's obviously what our position is.
That's the guy who's been put in a very tough position. And let's just jump. We're gonna need another minute. Let's just jump to the significance of this. So we just had the confirmation hearings of William Barr. So let's say, what if we could go back in time and get them to ask questions about exactly this situation? We just did, and they did. So here is Lindsey Graham.
There was some reason to believe that the president tried to coach somebody not to testify or testify falsely. That could be obstruction of justice.
Yes, under that, under an obstruction statute, yes.
So if there's some evidence that the president tried to conceal evidence, that would be obstruction of justice potentially, right?
And maybe it is. Another one, let's bring up Amy Klobuchar.
You wrote on page 1 that a president persuading a person to commit perjury would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Or any person who persuades another to, yeah.
Okay. You also said that a president or any person convincing a witness to change testimony would be obstruction. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so again, we don't know for 100% if this is true. There are people who do, by the way, know if it's true or not. And if it is, William Barr's on the record. That is obstruction of justice.
Does he pull his attorney general nominee? Because guess what? You're not going to find any high-ranking legal minds that don't think that that's obstruction of justice. And if you do, that's a really, really sad. I mean, what if he does? He pulls Barr. He's like, oh, that's real bad. Because if that turns out to be true, I think that's it. And I haven't really said that before, like the that's it moment. But if he told Michael Cohen to lie, and they have documented proof of that, and then Barr's the attorney general,
Yeah.
I just don't see how you don't go forward with a prosecution based on your buddy Mueller, because a lot of that testimony also was literally parts where Barr says, the Muellers and the Barrs are close friends and will be after this.
Yeah, I don't think anything is that's it. I don't have one of those John Oliver buttons, nor would I, because I think that we will be stuck in this exact same shade of hell that we are right now for the rest of our lives. That's what I'm mentally prepared for. But this certainly doesn't look good for the president. So we will continue to track it as he responds. Rudy Giuliani hasn't gone on TV yet. That's going to be fun. Anyway, we are going to take a first break, though. When we come back, healthcare after this.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Last week, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio proposed a $100 million plan to expand healthcare access, including to undocumented immigrants, that he says will cover an additional 600,000 people. Joining us now on the program to help break down what is included in this plan, how it differentiates from what is currently available in New York City, is Richard Gottfried, New York State Assembly member from Manhattan. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be with you.
Very happy to have you here. I want to also tell our audience you were the chair of the Health Committee and also the longest serving member of that body, and we appreciate having your expertise on the show. Very interested in this New York NYC CARE program. I'm trying to get an idea, though, with what is already available in terms of healthcare in New York City, how much does this actually change the status quo? How big of a change is this?
Well, the New York City Health and Hospitals Corporation, our public hospital system, has been offering free or sliding scale care for New Yorkers since the 1700s. Actually, I mean, it wasn't the Health and Hospitals Corporation then, but Bellevue Hospital goes back to the 1700s doing this. The main thing that is new in that part of the program is that the city's network of public hospitals and clinics will be now much better organized to provide services to uninsured and low-income New Yorkers, particularly immigrants who, because of their immigration status, may not qualify for various public benefits. Although in New York we do a much better job of covering immigrants than I think almost any other state, they will have an identification card. So when they show up for care, there will be an account that they get plugged into, and they will have a regular primary care doctor. And the city will be using a lot of the $100 million that they're putting to beef up their services, so that people don't just show up in an emergency room for care that if I were getting that care, I would be seeing my family doctor. They will be beefing up a customer service line, with my health coverage. If I have a question about what's ailing me and should I go to the emergency room or what have you. In my health coverage, I've got a nurse's line that I can call and can help me find where to go. People who don't have a really good health plan don't have that kind of service. So the City Health and Hospitals Corporation will now be gearing up to provide that kind of help. The other thing the city will be doing is doing a stepped up marketing effort, basically, to encourage people who are eligible for our Medicaid program or our child health insurance program or what we call the Essential Plan, which is what the Affordable Care Act calls the basic health program, which New York and Minnesota are the two states that have taken advantage of it, which provides much more heavily subsidized ACA coverage for people who are a little above the Medicaid eligibility level, and covers a broader range of immigrants. So they will be doing a better job of encouraging people who are eligible to sign up for that coverage, and also to sign up for Affordable Care Act coverage if their income level is above the level for the various public programs. So it will help get more people into health coverage that they're entitled to. And for people who can't get health coverage, it will help them get better served when they show up at the city's public hospitals and clinics.
So I want to go just a little bit farther than this. I know that this exists in a context where the mayor has put forward a couple of different bold proposals in different areas. And I also know that in this same area, there has been talk about the possibility of some form of single payer bills being put forward for consideration. I believe that you've been talking about that recently on your Twitter account. How likely is that to happen, and how does this expansion by the mayor, how does that influence that potential?
Well, I've been the sponsor of what is called the New York Health Act, which would create a single payer system in New York State. I've been sponsoring that bill since the early 1990s. We now are in a position where there is not only a majority for that bill in the state assembly, which has had a Democratic majority for many, many years and has passed the bill 4 times. We now, since last year's elections, have a Democratic majority for the first time in a long time in our state Senate. So we have, I think, a very good shot of having this bill pass both houses in the legislature. Mayor de Blasio has very strongly endorsed that bill and has reiterated his support for it. And he and the Mitchell Katz, the head of the Health and Hospitals Corporation, have both said very clearly that they understand that the NYC Care program does not do the job of the single payer bill. It helps fill some gaps in the current system. Single payer coverage is actually in many ways mainly important for people who, for the 95% of New Yorkers who currently have health coverage, but who struggle with deductibles and copays and restricted provider networks and more and more costs being shifted to working families and insurance companies dictating what doctor you can go to or what care they will pay for. So the NYC Care program is an important program. But the mayor very strongly understands that it doesn't replace the need for the New York Health Act, and he continues to very strongly support it.
Yeah. Well, the possibility of it passing, especially in a state like New York, is an exciting prospect. So we will be keeping our eye on that.
Yeah.
And
by the way, we still haven't gotten our Governor Cuomo, on board. He has said that single payer coverage is the right thing. He raises concerns as to whether it can be done at the state level instead of the federal level. We're working on trying to persuade him.
That's convenient since he operates on the state level and not the federal level.
Yes. Well, we're working on bringing him on board.
Okay. Well, I hope that you're successful in that. Richard Gottfried, thank you for joining us on the Damage Report.
My pleasure.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, more news for you. Welcome back to the Damage Report, everybody. So much to get to, and we're not going to. but we're gonna do what we can and talk about some of it. In the days following Representative Tulsi Gabbard announcing that she would be seeking the Democratic nomination for the presidency, we did what we do as a society. We found the things about them that are potentially pros, potentially cons. And one area that was considered a con and has been talked about, to be fair, for some time is her past statements on the LGBTQ community. A number of people feel like the things that she has said and advocated for in the past are an issue for a progressive nominee for the Democratic Party. So she has put out a video addressing those concerns and talking about her current feelings and views on the community. Here is an excerpt from it.
Aloha. In my past, I said and believed things that were wrong. And worse, they were very hurtful to people in the LGBTQ community and to their loved ones. Many years ago, I apologized for my words and, more importantly, for the negative impact that they had. I sincerely repeat my apology today. I'm deeply sorry for having said them. My views have changed significantly since then, and my record in Congress over the last 6 years reflects what is in my heart: a strong and ongoing commitment to fighting for LGBTQ rights. Now, I know that LGBTQ people still struggle. They're still facing discrimination, still facing abuse, and still fear that hard-won rights are going to be taken away by people who hold views like I used to. That cannot happen, because every American deserves to be treated equally by their fellow Americans and under the law.
So it goes on for several more minutes. That is now available. You can find that both on YouTube, but also at Representative Gabbard's Twitter account. So she talks there both about the evolution of her views, but also her positions as an elected official on issues having to do with the community. And I do want to just briefly, we're gonna get to it in a second. I want to read a little bit about that. So this is from out.com that says, since her election to the House of Representatives back in 2012, Gabbard has opposed the Defense of Marriage Act, spoke out against the president's proposed trans military ban, and supported the Employment Non-Discrimination Act. The representative is also a member of the House LGBT Equality Caucus, and her voting record on LGBTQ plus rights has a score of 100 out of 100 from the Human Rights Campaign. So in terms of what she has done as a representative, she has a very good track record.
Yes, I was just gonna say that in the rest of her video, she talks about her dad a lot.
Yeah.
And kind of frames her young life as one in which her outspoken anti-gay father had a lot to say in that arena. And it took a while before she herself realized that those views are, and especially fighting for them in a legislative sense, that's bad for America, and that's wrong. She didn't really she said that those views were wrong, those things she said were wrong, and in something that she did right here that people have gotten on Kevin Hart for, is she actually said, she found a way to say, I did it wrong, I apologize, now is the time to apologize again. Here is my apology, clearly stated, again, without being mad at you for not having heard it yet.
Yeah. Whenever you, so I was thinking about the Kevin Hart thing too. Whenever you give an apology, there are a number of ways that you can accidentally or purposefully undercut it.
Right.
And I didn't see those things.
She didn't have any of those. I'm sorry you feel that way. If you were offended, I apologize for you being an idiot, essentially.
She didn't imply that we're the issue. She implied that she talks about her upbringing and everything. And I think for a lot of people who grew up in socially conservative households, that's sort of understanding.
Right, that is the arc.
Yeah.
And that the various presidents that a lot of us consider allies have had stances in the past that are similar to the one that she's articulated, and articulated them in the way that she did.
Yeah, and just think, there's no reason to talk about Kevin Hart right now, but if Kevin Hart had delivered that exact video, I think he would have done pretty well for himself, I think. Now, that's not to say that people won't still have concerns, especially members of the community. I don't speak for that community, I barely speak for myself. So everybody has to decide for themselves what they think.
So watch the damage report every day.
Exactly, everybody has to decide for themselves, but I think that when these concerns were raised, people, including myself on the show, said, I want to hear what you think and what you believe. And she did it, I think.
And that out.com appraisal, as well as her report card when it comes to voting to the, I get it. Ideally for me, my hierarchy of needs goes, I want someone Like the most luxurious version of that is someone who has always and forever believed that LGBTQ rights are sacred and should be defended and advocated for at every turn. And that's how I believe. And there will be people out there who are on the ticket or who are running for the Democratic nomination who fit that, to whom I will gravitate more. But the second thing, if I don't get that fancy one, I get someone like Tulsi Gabbard who says, listen, it's been a struggle for me in my family, and everyone who has grown up in a family like this can identify with that. I'm just explaining the course of events that led to who I am and how I am today. But I will never vote to take your rights away.
Exactly.
So every part of my job as a legislator and potentially as someone with the bully pulpit would be to espouse something where it's like, I know what you get, I know what you believe, I'll protect what you believe, but I will not take away rights from you.
Yeah, I think she's a little bit above that, but below the first one in that she did seem to not, what I got off the video was not just I won't vote to take away your rights, but also she seemed to empathize with and actually have evolved views-wise. I mean, I can't, I'm not a psychic, I can't look into her harder necessarily, but that is what I got from the video. And I know, like I said, it's a very understandable life story. Like Anna has said that she grew up in a conservative area and her views evolved once she started to question them. I think a lot of people did. So I think that that's something that people can understand. Now, obviously we're about to move on to other stuff. We don't have a lot of time. There are other concerns that people have about Tulsi Gabbard and her views on certain issues, the same as with many candidates. We've got months before the first debate. We'll be breaking down all that stuff. But on this issue, I think that she did a pretty good job, although we will see how members of the community receive her apology. And again, there's more to it. You can find that on her social media and things like that. With that said, we are gonna take a break. When we come back, author's gonna be joining us, talk about special counsels. Seems important considering the news of the last 24 hours. Joining us now on the Damage Report, University of Arizona law professor and author of Prosecuting the President, Andrew Coan. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, it's great to be here, John.
Great to have you here, especially today. We had previously set up this interview. It just happened that there was gonna be gigantic news having to do with this. So I would like to ask you at least a little bit about last night's reporting from Buzzfeed News having to do with new evidence of obstruction of justice by the president. Now we know that part of the investigation that Robert Mueller is up to has to do with obstruction of justice, but they have been very tight-lipped about what they're actually getting up to, what they know. Does this, in your mind, change your calculus at all about how significant obstruction of justice will be as a component of the final report?
This story is a very big deal. If it's true, I think it really represents a game changer in the obstruction side of Mueller's investigation for several reasons. First of all, these new charges reported by Buzzfeed do not involve any kind of murky questions of intent. There is no lawful reason to direct your lawyer to lie to Congress in the midst of a very serious national security investigation. There's also no legal gray area here. There's no argument, not even a bad one, that this is part of the president's constitutional powers, like firing the FBI director. Third, Trump's own attorney general nominee said repeatedly at this week's confirmation hearings, and he has a notoriously narrow view of the president's ability to obstruct justice. But even William Barr said at his confirmation hearings that this conduct that Buzzfeed charges that Trump has engaged in is clearly obstruction of justice, even when the president does it. And finally, it's not Trump's word against Cohen's. Both of them obviously have some significant credibility problems, but according to Buzzfeed's sources, there are corroborating documents, texts, and witness testimony from inside the Trump organization. So, of course, all this comes with the caveat that the story has to be true, but I think if it's true, it's a very big deal.
Yeah. So look, I'm very happy that we have you on here, considering that your book covers the history of these sorts of special investigators and how they've functioned, how they have been stopped from functioning. And so I want to ask you a couple of different elements of that. And it has to do with things that I think a lot of people are taking for granted about the way this will play out. So I know a lot of people seem to believe that there will definitely be a report from Mueller. It'll be a big report, summarize the findings. We will see it and know what's in it. What do you think the chances are that will actually end up happening?
William Barr said pretty clearly at his confirmation hearings that he was not committing to release the full text of whatever report Robert Mueller files at the end of his investigations. And it's clear that Mueller himself is required under the existing regulations to file that report confidentially with the Attorney General in the first instance. Now, that's not the end of the story. That's the beginning of the story. There's going to be significant political pressure on Barr, if he's in fact confirmed, as I think is expected at this point, to release the full text of the report and certainly to release the bulk of its substance. The House of Representatives will have the power to subpoena that report. That might result in a court fight over executive privilege. But I think at the end of the day, large chunks of this report are almost certain to come out, either to be released directly to the public or to be obtained by Congress. And despite all of the caveats and qualifications that he offered at his confirmation hearing, Barr did strongly signal that he understands the importance of transparency in this regard. And I just don't think that a respected, basically establishment lawyer like William Barr is going to want to go down in history as Donald Trump's bagman if the evidence isn't as bad as this most recent story in fact suggests.
Well, perhaps this is a pretty related topic in terms of what William Barr might be willing to go down in history for. But I know that a number of people think that the prospect that Donald Trump would either directly or indirectly end this investigation is a bridge too far, that would not actually happen. But as we've said, you've covered the history, about a century of these sorts of investigations. Historically, that sort of thing has happened, correct?
That's right. It's happened 3 times before. The most famous episode in which a president fired the special prosecutor was, of course, the Saturday Night Massacre during Watergate. In October of 1973, the first Watergate special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, had sought a court order to obtain secret White House tapes. Court issued that order, and the president refused to comply. And when Cox refused to drop his quest to obtain those tapes, Nixon fired him. And the public backlash to that decision was immediate. It was ferocious. Hundreds of thousands of telegrams and letters and phone calls poured into the White House and both houses of Congress. And almost immediately, Nixon backed down and appointed a second, genuinely independent special prosecutor. His name was Leon Jaworski. And it was Jaworski's investigation that ultimately forced Nixon's resignation. So that's sort of the happy chain of events where a president takes a step to shut down the investigation and political pressure forces him to back down. But there are 2 previous episodes in which presidents fired special prosecutors and did not face serious consequences. The first involved Ulysses S. Grant, who fired the very first special prosecutor in U.S. history back in 1875. And the second involved Harry Truman, who now has a pretty clean-cut reputation, but actually fired his special prosecutor near the end of his second term at a time when he was a lame duck president and didn't have much to lose politically.
Well, so it looks like if this were to be ended, that would be, a continuation of a grand tradition in American politics. So I guess we have that to potentially look forward to. But anyway, I want to thank you for joining us on the show, sharing your expertise. The book is Prosecuting the President. Andrew Cohen, thanks for coming on the Damage Report.
Okay, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, C-SPAN has a new most viewed video in their Twitter history, perhaps for good reason. We will show you a bit of that speech from the House floor after this. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Not much time. Let's talk about one more story, something that's significant but also more optimistic. I want to close out the week with a little bit of happy time, since we do, after all, have the happy half-hour guy here.
Oh my God, are you gonna watch it this week at Friday at 5?
Obviously.
Ricky Strom, despite the fact which you...
Yeah, he said, I'm gonna hold a little bit of my hand over part of the screen, but I'm sure you'll be delightful. And
Thank
maybe
you
self
very
Photoshop
much.
or something.
Please watch.
Anyway, with that, why don't we jump into the news? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a new representative, gave her first speech on the House floor, which C-SPAN obviously covered. They posted on Twitter, rapidly became the most viewed video in their history, and I think for good cause. Here's a section of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about air traffic controllers and the real concerns surrounding the government shutdown.
And it is terrifying to think that almost every single air traffic controller in the United States is currently distracted at work because they don't know when their next paycheck is coming. Federal workers' jobs are stressful enough. The rise in New York City's cost of living is stressful enough. The fact that Mr. Obed's family cannot be reunified due to fears over the Muslim ban is stressful enough. His several $1,000 a month Bronx mortgage is stressful enough. The anti-immigrant sentiment of this administration is stressful enough. And the truth of this shutdown is that it's actually not about a wall. It is not about the border, and it is certainly not about the well-being of everyday Americans. The truth is, this shutdown is about the erosion of American democracy and the subversion of our most basic governmental norms.
That is, I would say, perhaps second only to Cardi B, the most spot-on analysis of this shutdown that I've heard in the past couple days.
Usually when I hear a politician do what she did, which is, here's a story of one of my constituents, they usually do it in a way that is presented as like, oh my God, here it comes. I sat down with Molly May, and we were in a diner, and we were eating steak and potatoes, or like some like mashed potato, home soul
big
food.
bowl of
You're just like,
mashed
all right,
potatoes.
stop putting it in perspective of one person. But what she does is she outlines one specific individual, Mr. Obed, from her constituency who is having a tough time, and she's pointing it out. And it was just amazing. It gave me chills. And then she further on in that speech talks about how there are no norms anymore. It is the new not normal, and it continues to be so. And it was just a really great floor speech, and people love her. And people who hate her because they also love her.
And they probably watched it. It's the Howard Stern sort of thing. They watched it twice as long. Yeah, so I want to return to that in just a second. In terms of the sort of invoking individuals you have met, I mean, I obviously have known it for a very long time that that's sort of a technique you use rhetorically. But man, President Obama was good at that.
Really good.
It was really good. And I would say, to some extent, individuals like him have ruined it for other people, because now when most politicians do it, it's just like, okay, you've got your list of 3 people.
It's always
it feels
the look
cheap
down.
by comparison.
It's always the look down.
Yeah, you got to remember
they
this
go,
peasant's name.
My favorite person.
But she did a good job.
Thomas.
Yes. So look, in terms of the erosion of norms, I'm glad that she is refocusing on that, because look, in one sense, it's about the wall. Technically, that's what he wants. But he's not doing it because he so genuinely wants a wall. He's doing it for political calculations. Direct political calculations like, can I still get elected if I don't get a wall? But also sort of ridiculous BS media political implications like, will Ann Coulter yell at me if I don't get a wall?
They are last ditch efforts. They just sound like last ditch efforts. The last thing he can do, he's not broadening his base, he's doubling down on his disappearing base, because if he doesn't do this, they're going to say you promised a wall, you didn't do it, and some people will leave. And
I don't even think that would be
his
that many
argument is that he ran on this, so he has to do it. So because he won, he deserves to get the wall because he won. He didn't win because of the wall. He was able to grow his base because of the wall, but there were a bunch of other factors on the other side that led to Hillary Clinton losing. She had a lot of baggage. She didn't energize her base. The wall is not the only reason he's here. And despite that fact, there aren't enough people who support the wall for you to say that most Americans won the wall.
We can see the polls.
Also, since then, there's been another election. And during that election, the reason that you're going one-on-one against Nancy Pelosi is because you've already lost.
Yeah.
You would otherwise be going with whoever they replaced Paul Ryan with.
McCarthy probably, yeah.
So, but in this situation, you've already lost because you're in this battle. Not to mention the part where I feel so crazy. I feel like I'm being gaslit. Where it's like, do I play again the video where he's like, this is my shutdown.
I won't blame you.
It's like, what?
I won't blame you.
So ridiculous.
Yeah, you didn't, as you said, you didn't win because of the wall. Partially because you didn't win. You just lost an election. It was a wave election. You lost 40 seats. It was a larger popular vote margin that the Democrats had than the gigantic wave in the 90s. You lost after making it about the wall and border security and caravans and all that other BS stuff. That was your choice. It was a bad choice because you went on to lose, and now we know that people don't support you on those topics.
And 800,000 people, as AOC brings it back, 800,000 people who have jobs, good jobs, government jobs.
Yeah.
The realistic, or the ones that are secure jobs. Those people, the president is single-handedly, him and Mitch McConnell, so 2 people. As AOC tweeted yesterday, there are enough votes in the Senate to pass a budget now.
Yes, that's part of those erosion of norms that Mitch McConnell knows that. He won't allow a vote, not because his party would lose, which would theoretically be bad enough, but because his party would vote for it.
He already had this vote. That's the thing.
Yeah.
The reason it's Trump raising all the anyways, we don't have time, but he's cuddling up to Trump so that he can win his own personal election.
Exactly, yes. Erosion of democracy, as AOC points out. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Especially with Patch's classing place up. You look like a professor in Vermont. Thank you for watching, everybody. We'll be back next week on Monday. God knows what'll have happened by then. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.